As with anything that changes as the years progress, the Major League Baseball playoff format has evolved over time. In the very beginning, from 1903, the year the first ever World Series was played, throughout the next 65 years through 1968, there weren't really even playoffs. There was the regular season, and the best team from each league won the pennant and went on to face off in the World Series against one another. It was that simple. Fun fact, but in 1904, there was no World Series because, get this, the New York Giants just straight up refused to play. Pretty wild enough to hear that on its own, but the reason is even more ridiculous. It's because the owner of the Giants at the time deemed the Boston Americans the champions of what he felt was an inferior league in the American League. The Giants owner also had some personal beef with the American League president because he had gotten with his wife. No, I'm just kidding. That's not why. At least I don't think it was. But they did have animosity toward one another, so that had something to do with him refusing to let the Giants participate in the World Series too. The World Series was also not a compulsory event and was not governed by an authoritative body, so the Giants were able to do this. So it was just the two best teams playing in the World Series. That was the playoffs. And then in 1969, both leagues expanded to 12 teams, and there were now two playoff rounds, with the League Championship Series being added on to be played before the World Series, originally being a best-of-5 series before being updated to a best-of-7 in 1985, which is what it still is to this day. But are there still just two playoff rounds to this day? Of course not. In 1993, the Atlanta Braves finished the season with 104 wins, while the San Francisco Giants finished with 103. Unfortunately for the Giants, they happened to be in the same division as the Braves, and with that, missed out on the postseason entirely, despite winning 103 games. So in 1994, a Central Division was added to the American and National League, with Major League Baseball also adding a wild card spot for each league to avoid another situation like the 1993 Giants. We didn't actually see this happen until 1995 though, because of the 1994 strike, which resulted in the season getting halted halfway through and nobody winning the World Series that year. But from 1995 through 2011, the 4-team in each league, 8 overall team playoff format was the way that it was. But after those 16 years, it was time for more change, with the new collective bargaining agreement between Major League Baseball and the Players Association agreeing to add on a second wildcard spot to each league, which would then result in the 2 wildcard teams facing off in a one-winner-take-all wildcard game. Now, the way I viewed the wildcard game was like this. I always found it incredibly fun. It was so unpredictable and chaotic, and I remember doing the math on it every year when it updated and realizing how meaningless it was to be home for the wildcard game, because from 2012, the first year they started doing the wildcard games, through 2021, the final year they did the wildcard games, there were 18 wildcard games played over those years. How many did the home team win? 9, with the visiting team of course winning as many. So the history of the wildcard winner-take-all game will go down in history as a complete toss-up between who won. There were 5 shutouts out of those 18 games, but get this, every single one of those 5 shutouts were thrown by the visiting team. Just fascinating stuff, and just shows how random things can be when you bring it all down to just one game. As much as I love the wildcard game, I always agreed with what Andrew McCutchen's take was on it, back when he said, quote unquote, baseball's built for a series more than one game. You don't ever see anywhere in the game of baseball where 30 teams play a team one time. Doesn't happen. I believe the reason behind that is because the game is so unpredictable, you don't know what's going to happen. And he's totally right. As much as I love the intensity of one game being a win or go home situation, I always looked at it this way. If the ball doesn't bounce your way once, you shouldn't have your season immediately ended and you deserve a second chance. If the ball doesn't bounce your way twice, it's not your year. That's how I've always felt. So I had for years supported the idea of a 3-game series for the wildcard teams to play in, which is of course eventually what MLB decided to go with. 2020 was a temporary 16-team postseason format year, with it going back to the 10 teams in 2021, but during the lockout before the 2022 season, MLB and the Players Association agreed to not only just update the wildcard game into a 3-game series, but they also agreed to add on yet another wildcard team to the postseason format, expanding it to 12 teams overall now, 6 in each league. At first, I wasn't the biggest fan. I kind of liked how baseball had the least amount of teams make the playoffs. I mean, it still does. But it made every game during the regular season mean so much more when you have such a limited amount of teams making it. I never want the Major League Baseball playoffs to end up like the NBA, NHL, or NFL format where 16 teams, so more than half the league, makes it in the NBA and NHL, and 14 teams in the NFL. But I also get it from MLB's perspective. To start, like I said, 12 teams is still not as many as the other leagues, obviously, so it's still the toughest playoff format to make it into, and it also incentivizes more teams to shoot for the playoffs than before, to spend more money, make more trades, keep the fans invested, and that's something that I can get behind. More teams being in it makes it more fun in the end because there's higher chance for drama in the final days of the regular season. With that said, 12 teams is enough, and they can't be going any more than that. So we started with literally just 2 teams, the best American League squad and the best National League squad, dishing it out for the trophy, and that's what it was for a long time. Then it became 4 teams for a while, then that was multiplied by 2 with the addition of the wildcard teams, then 2 more were added on, so make it 10, skip ahead to the most modern version of the postseason format, and now it's 12. Because yet another wildcard spot was added to each league. So there are now 3 division winners and 3 wildcard teams. What happens now is the number 3 seed, so the division winner, with the worst record plays the 6th seed in a best-of-3 series, the wildcard team with the worst record, while the 4 and 5 seeds, both being wildcard teams, play each other in a best-of-3 wildcard series. I will say I do kind of like the idea that winning your division doesn't automatically get you into a 5-game series. Instead, now there's a chance you won't get a first-round bye and will have to play a 3-game series just to get to that 5-game series. So it makes winning as many games as possible important because you really want to be that 1 and 2 seed, the division winners who do in fact get that first-round bye. Or do you want to be those teams? And that's where we get to the current controversy that's really been brought to light this postseason. In 2023, we have seen upsets galore. The Dodgers won 100 games this year, only to get swept in the NLDS by the 84-win Arizona Diamondbacks. The Atlanta Braves won 104 games, only to lose their series in 4 games to the 90-win Philadelphia Phillies. And the Baltimore Orioles won 101 games this year, only to get swept by the 90-win Texas Rangers. Now, normally people would just chalk these upsets up as exactly that, an upset. But the controversy, if you want to call it that, for lack of a better term, or maybe the concern brought to the table by many fans, has been the fact that every single one of those extreme upsets had something in common. The Dodgers, Braves, and Orioles all had a first-round bye. In other words, they had 5 days off. During those 5 days off, the teams that ended up beating the Dodgers, Braves, Orioles were all playing in the wildcard series. So the concern is basically that 5 days off is too much, and actually, if anything, gives the teams with the best records in baseball a disadvantage because whoever they play will be coming in hot with momentum, while the Dodgers, Braves, and Orioles are all rusty because of the 5 days they had off. Now, don't get me wrong, I understand the argument, I really do, but I just don't really like the idea that these teams with lesser records actually have an advantage over the teams with the better records, and this is for multiple reasons. Okay, so people think, for example, the Dodgers having 5 days off threw them out of rhythm, and that's why they didn't play well against the D-backs. Well, the Dodgers also had 5 days off during the All-Star break this past July, only to start the second half out by winning 4 of their first 5 games afterward and 6 of their first 8 games afterward. The Orioles had 4 days off during the All-Star break this year, only to then sweep the Marlins to start their second half and win 5 of their first 7 post-All-Star break games. The Braves had 4 days off during the All-Star break and actually started their second half by winning the first game, but then losing 4 in a row. Ironically, the Braves, who had the worst start after the All-Star break compared to the Dodgers and Orioles, are the one team of the 3 that was able to win a postseason game this year. So the point I'm trying to make here is baseball is just a completely random sport so much of the time, and there is proof that the Dodgers and Orioles played well after having several days off in a row. And you can argue, well, everyone had several days off during the All-Star break, but I still just don't buy the Dodgers, Braves, and Orioles getting upset by teams with much lesser regular season records being because they were rusty. Also, 5 days off for your pitching staff is great for a reset. I mean, 5 days off, that gives you a completely fresh pitching staff ready to go, all hands on deck to start the series. And also, my number one argument regarding this is that at the end of the day, if you can't win a playoff series because you had too many days off, you were never a legit World Series contender to begin with. I don't believe that that's the case. I genuinely believe the Dodgers, Braves, and Orioles all had the talent to make it all the way, but I also believe they just got smacked by teams who showed more fight in them because that's baseball, it happens. You pit any two teams against each other in a short series, anyone can win. The Oakland A's won 2 out of 3 games in Houston against the Astros in September, and also swept the Brewers at one point back in June. Does that make them a better team than the Astros and Brewers? Obviously not. They lost 112 games, which was the worst record in baseball this year, but it just goes to show that even the worst teams have dominant stretches at times. Even the worst teams have at least a decent chance to win on any given night. So of course a team with 90 wins like the Phillies will have a chance against the Braves, even though they won over 100 games. I've seen some say that the regular season now seems meaningless, and with the way some are complaining, it almost makes me think those people want the playoff format to be as simple as it used to be, the way I explained it at the start of this video. Maybe not just skipping to the World Series, but the 4-team format, like Braves Dodgers play, and whoever wins that series takes on the Orioles or Astros in the World Series. But I find it hard to believe anyone would actually want that, and that'll also of course never happen again, that kind of format. Because this is America, and in America we sure love our drama, so we gotta draw it out for as long as possible for all the major sports. So then how do you make it fair in the current baseball postseason format? How do you give the teams with the best regular season record the best advantage? Honestly, I feel like they do have the best advantage. I think having several days off for rest, practicing, preparing, and regrouping can really benefit your team. And not only that, but the best advantage to teams having the best records in baseball, the fact that you have one of if not the best records in baseball, meaning you're one of if not the best teams. That should be as much of an advantage on its own. The Dodgers won 100 games for a reason, the Braves won 104 games for a reason, the Orioles won 101 games for a reason. It wasn't by accident. And those 3 teams' seasons did not come crashing down because they had 5 days off. It came crashing down because they failed to play at their best in the most vital time possible. It's that simple, especially when you see that the Astros didn't lose their series to the Twins after their 5 days off, and also especially when you see that both the Dodgers and Braves did exactly what they did this year, last year as well. The 111-win Dodgers last year lost to the 89-win Padres in the NLDS, and the 101-win Braves last year lost their first round series to the 87-win Phillies, while the Astros swept the Mariners and the Yankees beat the Guardians. So maybe this is more of a Dodgers-Braves thing than it is an MLB postseason format thing. So is the MLB playoff format broken? Stupid? Is it dumb? Maybe you think so, and that's okay. But I feel like 2023 is just yet another example of what makes baseball the most random, chaotic, and unpredictable sport that there is. Let me know what you think. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.